Some of you may have heard the words, "die to live again." But few have thought of the fact that for some they may be practical advice, and for some they may even be part of a new life. And today's story is not about the transmigration of souls and all that goes with it. This story is more about fortitude and willpower, the will to live in spite of the fact that for everyone else you've been dead for a long time. Juliana recently celebrated her 65th birthday and her 48th birthday. Many will say something is not right here. But when you hear the story of this amazing woman, everything will fall into place. Juliana was born on October 10, 1954 to a family of German immigrants. Juliana's mother Maria was an ornithologist and her father a biologist. Life of the girl went its own way. Kindergarten, school friends and girlfriends, favorite hobbies and entertainments. And of course, a first date. Recently the girl was 17 years old. She was already finishing school, because the girl's parents were scientists. They had spent most of their lives on the road, and for the past few years they had worked in Peru. Christmas was approaching, which is known to be a family holiday. So even though her father was in South America, Juliana and her mother decided to give him an unforgettable present. On December 24, 1971, they decided to fly to her father, who was working in Pucallpa at the time, for the vacations. The plane, with 86 passengers and 6 crew members on board, was making a passenger flight from Lima to Pucallpa and took off on its course. But it never landed again. There was a slight delay that day due to bad weather in the Andes area. But after a few hours of waiting, the flight was still cleared. Because it was Christmas Eve, the Lima airport was packed with people in a hurry to get home or to their families to celebrate the holidays with them. So they were eager to get on any plane that was nearest and available. And coincidentally, one of these was Flight 508, which, despite the distrust of the airline, was generally fully booked. By the way, that's how 47-year-old Maria and her 17-year-old daughter Juliana ended up on it. Flight 508 took off from Lima at about 12:00 p.m. and climbing to an altitude of 6,400 meters, headed through the mountains. As Juliana herself, who was sitting in her seat by the window, later recounted, the first 25 minutes of the flight went quite normally, and passengers began to be handed sandwiches. As the Desire crossed the Andes, thunderstorm clouds appeared ahead, which was quite common in that region. So probably the crew, relying on their experience and underestimating the strength of the thunderstorm, decided not to go around the weather, which would have threatened to increase the flight time and knock the flight out of schedule. As Juliana recalls, gradually the clouds started to get thicker and darker, and there was a lot of turbulence. In just 5 minutes, it was as dark as night, and the plane was spinning from side to side, causing things in the cabin to fall off the shelves. Then there was a bright flash near the right wing. Lightning probably struck close to the engine, igniting the kerosene vapor in the left fuel tank. The fuel explosion destroyed the structure of the right wing and its compartment, after which the out-of-control plane went into a spin course. The crew began to try to regain control, but in the severe turbulence overload resulted in the separation of the left wing as well. It is difficult even to imagine the reaction and fear of the passengers in the cabin as they saw, felt and realized all this. The only thing left to do was to pray. Flight 508 went down, crumbling from the overload. The wreckage was scattered in an area with a 15-kilometer radius. Juliana was thrown out of the cabin at an altitude of 3,200 meters, along with the 3-seat seat to which she was strapped. The entire time the chair was spinning in the air, after which she lost consciousness. And as it would later turn out, she fell into the Amazon forest. Flight LP 508 was scheduled to arrive in Pucallpa at 12 kilometers. However, several hours passed without any word from the crew, so an urgent search was initiated involving aviation. But the situation was complicated by the fact that the war wreckage had managed not to break the trees when it fell, but had simply disappeared into the forest. More often than not, they were very difficult to spot from the air, and small fires were quickly put out and rained down. In many ways, the search was further complicated by the fact that it was unclear in what area the airliner had disappeared. In addition, many speculated that it had actually crashed in the central part of the Andes, crashing into a mountain. A few days later, everyone on board was pronounced dead. No one doubted it. No person would survive such a crash. Sometimes, however, people are very wrong. Juliana lay unconscious until 9 o'clock this morning, temporarily determined by a scientific clock. Waking up the next day, December 25, she found herself lying in the dirt under a chair. Her mother, who had been sitting in the same chair with her, and a full man, instead of 19, had disappeared. Julian woke up with a terrible headache and collarbone pain. She was also vomiting profusely. Her whole body was covered in cuts. She had no strength to unbuckle from her chair. The 3 seats she was strapped into didn't rocket down, but rather she glided, thereby cushioning the impact. Thus, fate gave the girl a second birthday. But as it turned out, that was only the beginning of her uneasy path to salvation. After trying to take a few steps, the girl fainted from pain. Her legs simply would not listen, and each step was difficult. The problem was compounded by the fact that Julian was severely nearsighted. Glasses, of course, broke from her clothes. She was wearing only the then popular slim minidress. Juliana tried to find the other people, but no one was around. Neither was there any more of the wreckage of the liner. We had to go, even though it was dangerous, but staying where we were was tantamount to folding our arms and just waiting for imminent doom. The girl decided to get out by all means, not knowing which way or where she was going at all. Exploring the surrounding area, the girl found a bag of candy, which she took with her. By the way, it was her only food. As she took her next step, she threw her shoes in front of her to avoid holes or other dangers. So, for 3 days, she simply walked forward in the hope that she would someday reach a settlement or a road. The places to sleep were chosen in advance, while it was still light. Julia made sure her back was protected by a thick tree or slope, and used a few large leaves instead of a devil. It was rainy season, and the raindrops beat on her body, disturbing her sleep. If it rained all night, the girl actually sat like that until morning. On nights when it wasn't raining, the mosquitoes pestered her a lot. On the morning of the 3rd day, she stumbled upon another chair, to which 3 female passengers were strapped an upturned chair, as a shell jabbed nearly a meter into the ground, and all 3 sitting in it died instantly. One of the women looked like her mother, so despite her fear, the girl decided to check it out. But it turned out it wasn't her. This gave hope that her mother was alive. Near the chair, Julia found a pie that was mixed with dirt and was not tasty. At the time, she had not yet realized how long her journey would last. So the girl threw it away and began to explore her surroundings. Fortunately, after a few hours of travel, Julian heard the noise of a brook, coming out to which she headed already downstream, because she knew from her father's lessons that the brook flows into a larger channel near the same river, and there might be settlements on the banks of rivers. That same day, she found a broken engine in the stream, the space around it covered in oil. It was much easier to walk, but the chance of encountering poisonous snakes was very high. She had also often encountered caimans, but she knew that they were not dangerous to humans, just as the piranhas that lived in the running water were not dangerous. She lost count several times. How many days had passed since the crash? The pain haunted the girl. Standing or sitting was unbearable. Even just chewing. The small berries were hard. But Julian's troubles didn't end there. After a few days, the wounds on her legs festered, and the important climate quickly turned into maggots. It only got worse. Every day brought only unbearable pain and suffering. Dangers surrounded her at every turn, but the schoolgirl kept walking. The candy she found ran out after 3 days, and instead of food, she just drank. Lots of water and ate berries. So 10 days passed, but the creek never led to people. Hope was already leaving the girl, and she had no strength to leave. Juliana sat down on the ground and thought that this was the end, that she would never be able to see her family again and hold them tightly. Tears streamed down her face. But our heroine found the strength to move on, and it paid off. On January 3, 1972, on her way out to the river, Juliana suddenly saw a boat and a canister of gasoline tied to the bank. There must be people near the boat, Juliana thought. And so the girl mustered all her strength and slowly wandered. In her legs, a grubbing pain reverberated. Then she remembered the case of the puppy, who had parasites on his paws, but her father cured them with kerosene. So gasoline might help too? The girl thought. With difficulty, the traveler overcame the ascent and saw the hut in which she climbed. In the sky to the kings, the rays of the setting sun. When Juliana came to, a stranger was leaning over her, poking her with a dirty stick. It turned out that the locals, returning to the shore, saw a half-naked stranger who looked more like a forest spirit than a person. She was discovered by a logger, Marcel Rivera, who was with two buddies. Using gasoline from a motor tank, she was rinsed out of her wounds, removing many worms. 11 hours later, a boat took her to the village. Juliana was then transported to the local airfield and from there to Pucallpa, where she was admitted to the missionary hospital. Only a day later, Hans Wilhelm was in the cap and found his daughter. Due to Julian's testimony, a massive search operation involving multiple aircraft, including the U.S. Air Force, was launched on January 5. On the same day, the 3 crash sites of Flight 508 were found from the Peruvian 10, and the Peruvian military arrived at the crash site on January 6. As it turned out later, 14 more people survived the crash and fall, but they died over the next 2 days from their wounds and lack of water. By January 13, 91 bodies had been found. That is, all the dead, of whom 56 could be identified, including Julia's mother, Maria. For a long time, the girl was haunted by nightmares of that ill-fated day. For years, she mourned her mother and the people who had died. The girl did not understand why she was the only survivor out of so many people. After Julia fully recovered, she enrolled and trained as a biologist, like her parents, and after a while returned to Peru to study the Amazon forest. At the age of 57, she wrote a book, When I Fell from the Sky. There she tells of her miraculous rescue, about this amazing story of survival and struggle. Several films have been made, all of which are noteworthy. For the past 10 years, however, Juliana has lived closer to her children and grandchildren. She works part-time at the library, where her book is among others. She willingly holds meetings with readers, where she tells the story of her miraculous salvation. December 24 is a day that is always marked red on Julian's calendar. After all, it was the day that divided her life into before and after. But in spite of everything, the girl gathered her strength to go on living and enjoying this world. Julian says that after everything you've been through, you have a different outlook on your life. You start to appreciate absolutely every day and every moment, because none of us knows when and where our time will end. So just be happy now and don't put off meeting your family and loved ones. And most importantly, you should never give up. There are times when it seems like the end, but no matter how hard it is, you always have to gather all your strength in your fist and move on. When you get through your trials, that's when you understand the true meaning of life. Write your opinion about this amazing woman and her story.